How's the sound? Everybody good? Yeah. All right, good. Praise God. My name is Ryan Lucas. This is my wife Victoria, and we are going to talk to you guys about exploring the mindset of getting out of Babylon and kind of how we got there and our path to where we are now. We want to thank Daryl and Dustin for bringing the Spirit in the room. We pray for you, brother. All right. So, Exodus Road, exploring the mindset. Here we go. Let's see. All right, so how did we get here? We had an awakening to truth. We had this overwhelming desire to leave the known and go back to what we considered the unknown, right? We had come into Torah probably 2011, 2012, and we're still just kind of bumping around blind, right? Still didn't really know what was going on. But Revelation 18:4, and I heard another voice from the heaven saying, "Come out of her, my people, lest you share in her sins, and lest you receive of her plagues." So that's pretty unambiguous, right? So that's the feeling that we got. That's where we decided, hey, we've got to go. We just didn't know how. So we started by, first of all, the Sabbath, the seeds, the way a lot of people do, right? We had these little bits and pieces, and then we started thinking, okay, these are all signs, right? These are outward signs of what we're doing. What about what's in here, right? What are we called to do here on earth? How do we walk in His ways to leave Babylon, to get out of the system? And we decided that we were going to start in here, right? Because we were told to go forth and replenish the earth, right? The very beginning of the book is a recounting. It's a love story, right? It's a recounting of Adam being created to till the garden and his helpmate being created to help him. And we were not very good at that. We were better than most, right? I like to think, but we were still struggling. We had a lot of differences of opinion. So we decided to go into the book, and when the Father said do something, we would do it. When He said to stop doing it, we would stop doing it. And what we discovered was everything that we were doing, right, even our vows of marriage, we said them to each other, but under the authority of Yahweh. So everything that I do for my wife is actually for Yahweh, and she gets the benefit of that. Everything that she does for me is actually for Yahweh, and I get the benefit of that. Right? So you really learn to put somebody else first. And if you stumble, you struggle, it's okay, it happens, right? We're made of flesh. We struggle against the sins of the flesh daily, right? That's why we have to die to ourselves every day.
Can I say something?
Yes, absolutely can.
Okay. Well, and you have to please forgive us because this is our first. I'm super nervous, and this is our first time that we're speaking publicly together, and so. And this is kind of strange for me in particular because I'm usually the one that talks a lot, and it's hard for me to talk. I'm like, we forgot this, but I'm going to do.
We struggle against the flesh daily.
Yes. So, yes, I did want to mention something about discovering our marriage, like what Ryan was saying, the fact that we tried so hard to walk in the ways of the Father through the example of Yeshua, and really what made the difference, and I hope this is the message that you all receive. When we figured out what marriage is truly all about is when we were able to walk out like the Messiah, because we are His bride, we are His wives, and it just became complete. So,
Yeah, she's right. There is, when you go back to creation and track it forward, there's a concentric truth, right? Yahweh is my covering. If I do what He says and I stay under the covering, I'm protected, right? Well, here on earth, my wife, I am her covering, right? Not that she has to do what I say. It's not the, I demand obedience, but there are things that I can protect us from and things that I can't. And when I explain those things and she stays in those guidelines, we're protected. She's protected. The kids are protected. And that's how it works. It's just, it goes all the way back to him. So I have to be the bride of Christ. I have to obey the bridegroom. That protects me and them. They can be obedient to me, and it protects them, right? So.
Amen, brother.
Oh, here we go. You want to take this?
Sure. Well, and I'm the one that did the presentation, and he really just, it's so awesome to
She was after me for 2 weeks. I didn't look at it till yesterday.
Yeah. Well, and it's awesome because at the same time, he's able to trust me to know that everything that I do is to honor him. And I work really, really hard not to ever do anything that would go against what I know him that well. So I think he trusts me and this presentation. So I really just wanted to touch a little bit about and they shall become one flesh. Because of time, it's a lot of information. I just wanted to touch on a few things. If you look at here where it says cleave, we know that the word tells us that the husband is to leave his father and mother and to cleave to the wife. And that word, when you look at it in the Hebrew aspect, it's just an amazing thing. It's not just, oh, okay, we're going to go into a marriage together. No, literally, it's adhere. It's this word that literally means, it's an amazing word where you're just fastened together, and it really just goes together with ahad, with we are one. So everything that we do together is a force that is just, the enemy cannot reach if you really get this understanding of what it means to be one. And so another word, we've studied ahad, we all know what one means, but this other word to me that was like, whoa, naked, which in my mind it was like, okay, well, they walked around with no clothes, wow, how cool. We've seen all these pictures, right? No, that has nothing to do with it. It has nothing to do with the outside. It was their heart. Their heart was, they were open to each other. They were, it's amazing. One of the things that spoke the most to me was that the husband deals with us in a delicate manner. In one word, that's like, wow, like amazing. And so, and where it says they were not ashamed, that word, which I will not even try, I already mess up English sometimes, so I'm not even gonna try Hebrew. Not ashamed, that word to me was, they were not annoyed with each other. That's the one that spoke the most to me. Because, let's be honest, there's a lot of things sometimes that he does that annoys the heck out of me. Well, you know, and so that is getting better. As we walk this out, there was no confusion, there was no disappointment. Can you guys imagine being in a garden surrounded with no annoyance, no anger, no stress, no worry? That is the word.
They cleave to each other. The only preconceived notions they had of marriage came from the father, right? So if I leave my father and mother and I cleave to my wife, and we go straight to the source, to the scripture, right? Then there's no preconceived notions, and we can walk around naked and not ashamed. We can know each other's hearts. Okay, so I think this one's you again, Beth.
No, it's just, it's because of time,
Yeah, so we wanted to give you guys kind of a timeline of where we were, how we started this in 2010. Like I said, we started the Inklings. I was still in the military. We started getting these it was a bad time in our marriage, you know. We were in a constant honeymoon. I was on deployment. I was in the field. I was never home. When I was home, it was a barbecue. We're great. Everything's fine, you know. Completely not naked and not ashamed. Everything was just pretty.
Well, I don't know if any of you are military families. Everything is compartmentalized. You just have to, you know, Daryl, you have to grab it and put it away, because that's not your mission. Your mission is whatever the Army or the Air Force or whatever the military is telling you that is the forefront. And so we lived 6 years in constant compartmentalizing everything. And when we got out, it was, so.
Right. Well, to give you an example, you can see here, July 4th, 2012, our youngest son, Bradley, was born. Okay, he wasn't just born, he was 3 months premature. He weighed 1 pound, 11 ounces, and he spent 86 days in the NICU? 87 days in the NICU, right? I could hold him in the palm of my hand on feeding tubes. He had a brain bleed that resolved, he flatlined twice. It was a very stressful time in our lives, right? However, I was so indoctrinated, right, that you can see right down here in November of the same year, I went to Afghanistan.
By choice.
By choice. I had the opportunity to stay home, but I didn't. Because in my mind, there was 120 guys who might not make it home if I don't go, right? And that was the choice to me. I made that choice, and I have to live with that. So fast forward to 2015, we got out of the Army, September 2012, we came to an understanding that the Sabbath does apply to us. And this was another contention in our marriage, but we had to go to the scriptures, right? And for me, it was because I was raised Catholic, she was raised evangelical, and I did not enjoy Sundays. I did not. It was no rest. You know, everybody get up early, we're gonna go talk to people that we're not gonna see for another 7 days, and then who knows, you know, we're gonna go buy some new clothes so that we can look good in front of people that we don't like.
That's what
So I got this understanding that we're gonna start with the fourth commandment, right? Let's observe, because somehow, you know, I heard the description, the 2x4 yesterday by Michael Mize. Well, he uses that on us a lot, right? Whenever we don't get it, he wants us to. It's like getting hit in the head with the 2x4, right? Well, we're worshiping on this first day of the week. That's not the seventh day of the week. So let's go to the commandments and let's start there.
I didn't like that.
No, I was back with my wife.
And I had known Jesus. I had known the Lord for, at that time, 27 years, and he had, in my mind, just gotten baptized. He just got baptized 5 years ago. I'm like, don't come tell me what it is that the Bible says. And no, so it was a very difficult time. And then, again, that was in September. In November, literally, I can tell you, 5 weeks later, after a week, after our first Shabbat, he takes off for 9 months. And I know that a lot of you out there know me personally. I'm a full throttle kind of girl. And during the 9 months that he was gone, I studied and I studied and I studied, and I kept hearing that little voice in my mind, which I know it was the Holy Spirit, but I did not listen. Wait for him. And I didn't. And when he came back, it was not a pretty picture. So.
Because I came back and I was still...
We've gone to one Shabbat.
Yeah, I was still the person I was who chose to go to Afghanistan. I didn't come home hungering for the word. I came home prideful, you know, just a willing sinner. That's who I was. And
so fast forward.
Yeah.
Get out of the Army.
We get out of the Army February 2015 and took a job in California. And it says, you can see here, Ryan has a garden moment. I'll go into this on a personal level if you come up later on. But the moral to the story is I had a very supernatural experience. Yes. And it was, you know, the 2x4 hit me, but to the point where I went straight to the ground on my face and bawled uncontrollably. And it was confirmation of everything that I had done wrong with my life and everything that I was supposed to be doing with my life. And I was allowed to ask a question of how do I protect my wife and my kids from the world? And the answer was the Torah.
Yeah.
The Torah. You know, there's 5 books explaining blessings and curses, right? And then you get 60 books explaining what happens when you don't obey, and then one book explaining the end. There's plenty of examples. Yeah. So, yes, but
ask him about his garden moment.
Yeah.
Come and ask him about his garden moment. He won't share it publicly. He got a word. He cannot share it publicly, but if he comes, he's come to a place where he knows that he has to share. All I can say that as his wife, he wouldn't let me record it. And all I can say is that I would look at him and he literally, and I'm not saying he was Moses, but to me, he looked like Moses. He had a beard down to here, he had come out of the military, been walking. Yes, and he was glowing. Literally glowing. And I would say, babe, please let me, I keep saying, babe, Ryan, let me record this, and he wouldn't let me. So if you have the time, please come and ask him, because it changed me as a believer, because it explained the Father's heart. And it is a broken heart for his children. Broken heart. So I'm sorry.
yeah, no pressure, but what I can tell you is that it was an experience in the throne room, and after that I was terrified. Just terrified. Shaking. Okay. So after that, from the time that we got out of the military to December 2016, so it's about a 2-year period, we moved 7 times. Yeah, talk about hard on the kids. But, okay, in June 18, 2015, we had left California, and because we realized we were just in the belly of the beast, and we weren't going to make it up there. We weren't strong enough spiritually to withstand that. So we left, and we considered it our physical exodus, right? Because we kept trying to tie it into the scripture.
And not only that, we looked for a U-Haul to fit our belongings, and we could not find one for a week, and we had to leave. And we could not stay where we were any longer, and we could not find a U-Haul to fit our belongings, and we literally left with just our personal belongings and left everything behind. So that's why I meant about physical exodus.
We left a lot of things. We took the stuff that was personal to the kids and it was personal to us, and everything else just stayed in the apartment. And we moved back to Texas, stayed with my aunt for a while. We found people like Ken Hovind, Tom Horn. We started doing the research, and we Now You See TV. It's one time Now You See TV. But again, 6 months there, we realized it wasn't where we were supposed to be. I had started nursing school, and I wanted to practice nursing in Kentucky, because that's where I'm from. That's where we met. That was like our base of operations for the family. So we moved back to Kentucky, and things snowballed from there. Just eternal blessing. The Feast of Trumpets in September 2016, we met the Halls. Hanukkah 2016, we met the Pounders. We met the Tishners. We met, Jake. We met, things just from there. It was like, now we can get started, right? Now we're good. I'm going to pass it over to Vicki to explain the next part of it in 2016.
Well, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because there's a video out there that you can, and I didn't put the link, I'm sorry, but if you look up 9UC TV, our testimony's on there, and it explains a little bit about what I went through. And in the Feast of Atonement of 2016, we were at a place that, we say this, but divorce was not an option. That wasn't a word for us. But we were literally like this, literally counterparts. There was nothing in us that, in my mind, could be restored. I was broken. I didn't know, Father, I can't get to him. He doesn't hear me. I don't hear him. We were so broken that on that Feast of Atonement, I remember him telling me, you know what, we have a problem. And there is a wall that you build that you don't ever let me get through. And I don't know if a lot of you know my testimony, but my testimony, I come from a background of sexual abuse from my father. father for many years, narcissist mom, oldest, I raised my sisters, and so a very difficult childhood in this marriage that I would never let him in. And so the Feast of Atonement, walking Torah out, I knew that during the feasts, if you come expecting, and I said, Father, you have to fix my marriage. I can't do this anymore. I don't know. We did counseling, we did every self-help book you can possibly imagine, talking to people. There was nothing that could fix it, and I went to the Father. And I literally, in the front of my porch, just had a supernatural moment where something literally got lifted off me, tried choking me. All I could cry out was, Yeshua, Yeshua. And at that point, I don't know from where, and I can't say I heard, this word meekness audibly, but it was just like this word meekness popped in my, and you guys don't know me from before. I have one meek bone in my body. The more attention I had, the better. The bigger the hair, the higher the heels, I wanted all of this attention. There was no meekness in me. Really, there was none. And this word came, and I was like, meekness? What the heck is that? And in my mind, I was like, okay, well, but I'm a humble person. But that's not really what meekness is all about. When the scriptures tell us that Yeshua and Moses were meek, this is what it was all about. They submitted to the authority of what the Father had in store for them. You know, it meant, again, this announced by affliction. That was a lot for me in particular, because I walked around thinking, I've been abused enough. I had this chip on my shoulder of being a victim. I was, I needed to be treated a certain way, and it was a badge that I wore. And as I learned what this word meekness means, like Yeshua had every authority to wipe them all out, zap them all out. And what did he do? He cried out for them. And so I had no idea how to even do this. I wasn't gentle. I was forceful. And because when I came into a room, I was pretty forceful. So this word, and again, if you guys do your own study, you understand that this is a word that is, you have all of the justification and all of the authority to do what you want to do, but yet you submit to what truly is the Father's will. Amen. And so, as a woman in today's world, that is very difficult. Very difficult, because to me, I don't know about you guys ladies, but that to me seemed to be weak. That was weakness. Yeah. And so I started understanding that meekness is not that I was a doormat. It wasn't that I was in resignation, No, I was a warrior. I was a prayer warrior, and I started to understand what these things really mean. I was I was active and deliberately accepting an undesirable circumstance. How many times does he tell me to do something that I'm like, really? And I'm like, okay, Father, And it's a process. It is a process. And so it's not swallowing a bad circumstance. That's what I thought humbleness was. No, in my mind, it was bitterness, it was frustration. And no, I understood that it was strength. It was strength that I had been put in a place of weakness that I had chosen to be in, to find really who truly Messiah is, because that's exactly what he did for us. And so, when you read the word submit, ladies, it does not mean, again, you're a doormat. It doesn't mean you allow abuse. It doesn't mean, and you guys should really, as ladies, study out what abuse is in a Hebrew mindset. Our Father up in heaven, we are a jewel. We are precious. We are very, very beautiful and special, and the man will have a consequence if he does not treat us that way. But that's between them and God. our job is to walk this out. It just is what it is. And it's a beautiful place to be in. Because I can tell you right now, after 14 years of marriage, he is my human shield. And it's awesome. Do your own studies. Study out what submit means, truly means. It does not mean allowing your husband to yell at you, to use foul language. It doesn't mean for him to allow for him to hurt you. It doesn't mean that he can trample you. It's actually the opposite. Submission is a beautiful, beautiful word. If you take what Yeshua walked out and you understand the word submission, it is very freeing when you submit. It's a beautiful place to be at. So there.
Okay. All right, so we're going over all that to let you guys know what it takes to get to a point where you're ready to move out, right? We had a lot of work to do before we could even receive the word of where to go, what to do when we got there. I mean, it took the Israelites 2 years to reach the Jordan. It was their choice to spend another 38 on the mountain, right?
You don't want to keep 38 years
No.
going around that mountain.
Don't keep going around the mountain. Right, so in February of 2017, we did an Exodus Road interview with Now You See TV at Otter Creek Park.
Which Jake was very gracious. It was a 2.5 hour interview, and he did awesome. He's here in the room, and thank you so much, Jake. Yes, it was a very difficult interview, and I just want to say, we were in the middle of a cabin. I had no hair dryer, no makeup, nothing. I was wearing bibs, and all of a sudden we get this call from John Hall, which Ryan decides to say yes because I would have said no. Hey, can we come out and just film your guys' testimony? We're like, what? No. And all of a sudden we have this film crew in a cabin, and it was very supernatural. And Jake in particular was very kind to me because it was a very difficult moment. And so I want to thank you.
He put up with a lot because we were trying to get ourselves ready for the wilderness, and Vicki refused to turn the heat on in the cabin. And I'm pretty sure Jake was wearing shorts and like sandals. So they let that they played that at the Passover conference in 2017 in Owensboro, right? And then fast forward to June 2018, and I finally finished after all this time of us trying to figure out what we could do to get ourselves ready. How are we going to get out there and make this happen, right? Getting out of Babylon. I finished nursing school. It took 3 years, almost to the day, for us to get this, finally start getting some finances together to get out there. And that's when Vicki got the understanding of Deuteronomy 6.
Yes, ladies, Deuteronomy 6 is a calling for the men of Israel. That's it.
That's it? All right.
And we are to be their helpmeet. Help them accomplish that.
And here it is. He shall turn the hearts of the fathers, right? The great day of the Lord. For behold, the day cometh that shall burn as an oven, and all the proud of ye, and all that do wickedly shall be stubble. And the day that cometh shall burn them up, saith the Lord of hosts, that it shall leave them neither root nor branch. But unto you that fear my name shall the Son of Righteousness arise with healing in his wings, and ye shall go forth and grow up as calves of a stall. And ye shall tread down the wicked, for they shall be ashes under the soles of your feet in the day that I shall do this, saith the Lord of hosts. Remember ye the law of Moses, my servant, which I commanded unto him in Horeb for all Israel, with the statutes and the judgments. Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. And he shall turn the heart of the fathers to the children, and the heart of the children to their fathers, lest I come and smite the earth with a curse. Because what's the common understanding of being a father? Do your best to make $100,000 a year, 5-bedroom house, swimming pool, nice cars, right? Video games. That's it, sports. But that's not it. Yeah, I mean, it's things, but it's like, all right, well, we're not actually spending time with our children. They're learning. We're supposed to teach them as we walk by the way, as we rise in the morning, as we lay down at night. It's supposed to be nailed to our doorposts. It's supposed to be on our wrists. We're supposed to be teaching our children. As the priest of my home, I'm supposed to be teaching my children the scripture. Here's how you get blessed. Here's how you stay out of curses. Right? So imagine as a lukewarm Christian how inept I felt in this. So we're doing our best to get to that point. We're going back more to the timeline. The days of awe in September 2018. We sought some counsel because again, if anybody can get in the Lord's way, it's us. Right? So we were having some troubles again, and we sought counsel from, you want to take that?
Yeah. I won't name names, but as a woman, I took counsel with someone that I thought was a sister that loved me, and at the end of the day, I didn't go about it scripturally. And unfortunately, I should have put this in here, and I'm sorry. Titus 2 women. Look for women that have been walking this out. Be very careful as ladies, because you know that us ladies, we like to communicate, and we have a circle, and we want, that fuzzy feeling. Well, you got to be really careful who you're getting that fuzzy feeling from. Because the counsel that I received basically led me to leave my home. Yes. And we were having very difficult times, and there was reason for me to leave, but the way that I left was very wrong. Instead of basically going around my home and breaking, these are the visions that I had. I wanted to just grab everything and rip it apart and slam doors, and I basically just got my purse and left. And I left for 2 days. And my husband didn't know where I was. So they were very, very difficult times. And the counsel that I received encouraged that. And it was wrong, because there is a way, if you are in a situation where you feel you need separation, there is a way to go about it. As ladies, we have protection. We do. If we were in the kingdom, the men would be held responsible if they were not doing their part, if they were not taking care of their wife. We would have what is called a kinsman. We would have kinsmen. We would have brothers, we would have cousins, uncles that would come to the husband and say, hey, guess what? You are not doing what you got to do for your wife. And they would be brought to the elders, and they would be dealt with. We would not be by ourselves. I felt by myself. I had no help. And so at that time, the only way that I had was just to leave, and for 2 days, and still my 7-year-old, this was last year, guys. My 7-year-old still has trauma every time that I leave. I turned off my phone, I checked into a hotel, and I didn't answer my phone. And so, finally, we started communicating. It did wake him up, but it created a lot of trauma in my home. And so this is why I wanted to put it on here, because as ladies, we can be in very desperate situations. He wasn't hitting me. It wasn't anything to do with adultery. So I really, if I look back, what I had to do was bring a brother, bring somebody in that I know that he would trust, and say, hey, what you're doing is not correct, and it's not right with what you're doing. And so I did not do that. and I just left. And so you guys have to be very, very careful who you talk to. Very, very careful. And so look it up. I'm sorry I didn't put it on here. Titus 2 ladies that have been walking this out for a long time. And they are out there. It's not just a regular Christian counselor, because they don't get it. They don't get it. They don't understand what it is to walk out in the Father's ways. Titus 2 women, they are out there. And so that's why I wanted to put that on there. And so 3 weeks later, there's Sukkot. Yay!
Yeah, so 3 weeks later, we went to Sukkot. Yay! It was a very spirit-filled environment. It was bigger than we ever imagined. We had to like start turning people away because there were no more campsites, right? I mean, it was that kind of thing. People traveled from all over the country. We had a guy from Egypt show up.
You didn't turn him away, did you?
No.
Oh, sorry.
There's no room at the end.
Yeah, so
People just kept showing up. We ran out of welcome packets.
Yeah. And it was a really inspiring event because all the men sort of banded together. Like we had what we perceived to be some dark forces try to creep in and sort of attack and bring us down from inside. And all of us banded together. We prayed. And it was a really awesome environment because there were times where everybody mingled. But a lot of times there was a separation of the men were over here handling men's issues and the women were over here handling women's issues. And I think the Father really took a liking to that because he was there. There was so many things that happened. We had gone to pick up a woman who was camping by herself in the primitive campsite. We went to pick up her stuff and bring her over to where we were so that she wouldn't be alone out in the woods by herself for a week. And when we got over there, we ended up getting locked out of the truck. There was a gentleman who did vehicle recovery for a living that had just driven back to Indianapolis, and we're like, oh no, we need to get a hold of that guy. All of our phones died, right? So here we are, and we could have walked in a very chafing, hot environment to get back to the campsite, but we were standing there like, okay, now how do we deal with this now? The police department was not an option. There was an answering machine, you know what I mean? And lo and behold, 3.5 minutes later, the guy who did vehicle recovery hadn't left yet. He had gone to somebody else's campsite, and he passed right by. 30 seconds later, yeah, 30 seconds later, we were in the truck. It was like, oh, hey, Sean, can you break into a Dodge Ram?
Yeah.
I mean, just stuff like that happening all over the place. I mean, we were reading scriptures till 4 in the morning, you know?
Well, and one thing that I didn't put on here that I forgot that was very important is that on that time, at that day, our 17-year-old who had declared himself an agnostic, and we did not want to get baptized as a family. He had come to Flat Earth, guys, he had come to Flat Earth, and he finally had said, okay, well, there's a God. And he had been walking it out. Flat Earth can be a salvation issue, guys.
For some people it is.
For some people it is. For our 17-year-old, he is walking with Yeshua now. That day, when he saw the kingdom of the Father, the kingdom of Yeshua being walked out in front of him, his father rose up. Everything, all the men were men and the women were women, and he felt safe. Guess what? He decided to get baptized.
It was awesome. Like we all went down to Rough River afterwards and jumped in, and it was freezing. Like you couldn't feel it. Like, you know, that was a great time. I'm sorry, you got something else?
No?
Okay.
I'm good.
So November 18, received a word from the Father about coming technology and how to prepare.
This is actually how our homesteading journey began, because we looked after Sukkot. It was just this amazing time of being in the kingdom with like-minded people. We were so blessed, and we came back into the world, and we were like, oh my goodness, we understood by 2 other witnesses, and it's a long story, that we do not have a lot of time. This is like no joke. And not only that, how are you going to prepare your children, our children, to not take on the mark of the beast? It's not, I mean, and as parents, we are held responsible. He, when he stands in front of his creator, our creator, is going to be held responsible because we're living this time. How did you prepare your son to provide for his family and not take the mark of the beast? And so it was a, as they say, a come to Jesus moment for us. We lived in a 2,300 square foot house, and we were like, you know, we've been talking about homesteading for 6 years at that time. And yeah, we've had a garden, but what are we doing? What are we doing? Are you walking this out? Like, okay, so you've been talking about this, and you keep making excuses. Well, we don't have money. You're working. It's very difficult. We have a 17-year-old. But I'm going to tell you, how are you going to prepare them not to get a Neuralink? Because they won't be able to get a job. They won't be able to feed themselves unless we prepare them. And of course, we're going to have provision. We are his bride. But we are going to be held accountable. This is the word that we received as the Lucases. You're going to be held accountable for not preparing your children to be able to feed themselves. And it's going to be an easy transition for them to say, you know what, I can't feed my daughter, I can't feed my children. I have to, you know, yeah, you can prepare them with the word, and that is amazing. That is awesome. That is the #1 thing. But there is strength and power in understanding how to walk out his ancient ways, like Jeremiah 6 says. And it's not just walking Torah out, it's how do you apply that scripturally in your life. And it's the garden.
It is, because it's awesome to have provision, but there were people who had provision who burst into flames at the Father's will, that the earth opened up and swallowed them.
Because they murmured.
Because they murmured and they were disobedient. They were given everything they needed, and they complained about it, right? So you want to know why we're doing this? You look out this window.
The bouncy house.
You look at all these. Look at the kids out there. I think they've shifted away from the bouncy house. So we, you know, finally, I think we were ready to move out, and you know, finally it was like, okay, what are we gonna do? Let's buy a Connex for $2,000 and just put an insulation in that. You know, just kicking around ideas like that, because we thought, again, we could do it, that we were capable of doing something that we had never done before.
1 month later.
1 month later, we
And I don't know, okay, I gotta say this. I don't know if you guys notice how a lot of things happened on the feasts.
Yeah.
Guys, that is his time clock. That is his timing. Go expecting awesome things, because he shows up. He shows up on his feast, on his appointed times. He really does.
Yeah, so during Hanukkah, we were presented with an opportunity to move to a homestead or a farm and be tenant farmers, right? So, right. I mean, they need farm hands. You know, they were short on farm hands, and we're short on farm. And it wasn't our doing, it was the Father's doing that made it all happen. And so now we're doing our dead level best to be, you know, my father was the generation that left the farm. I want to be the generation that goes back.
There you go.
And then we realized it was Deuteronomy 6, because we were moving into a house we didn't build, into fields we didn't sow, into, you know, wells we didn't dig. You know what I mean? So it was really just more than we deserved. It was.
Can I ask a question real quick? Are you guys living with other believers too? Okay.
Yeah. They're believers. They're like-minded.
Yeah.
Yes.
I didn't know if you just answered an ad in the paper or something. And move on, you know? Some people do that. That's why I was scared. Like,
Yeah. We'll hopefully we can get through this where we can have a Q&A. If
Okay.
you have questions, or you can find us after.
Right.
So this one's yeah.
Yeah, so, again, we started nitpicking each other because I wanted things done a certain way, Vicki wanted things done a certain way, we were both right. You know, that's how it goes. We both had this self-righteous indignation of, well, this is what we should do and this is what we should do. And we had the realization that we need to stop speaking curses over each other, because whatever you say gets recorded by the enemy, and you already have an accuser. His name is Hasatan. You already have an advocate. His name is Yeshua. Right? And when you get into the courtroom, everything that you say bad about your mate, your helpmeet, they'll call you to witness against that person.
Have you guys ever thought of that?
That's right.
Think about that. The day that the book is open and everything that you said is in a book, and everything that your husband said is in a book, and everything that you declared upon him or you declared upon her, there will be witnesses there that the enemy, the accuser, can bring out. Study this out. It's the divine counsel. There's a lot of scriptures on it. So just be very, very careful what you say about your children. That's why Yeshua always tells us, speak life. Speak life.
And the very last thing I want to do in front of my king is to speak against my rib.
Amen, brother.
Right? It hurts knowing the things that we've said to each other in the past, so now we strive hard to not do that in the future. Because it's not enough to stop doing it. You have to turn and go the other direction. Right? So we had that understanding, and then come to find out, we got our tax return that year, which I was expecting to be like 30 cents, you know? And it ended up being like 4 times what we thought it was going to be, so we were able to pay off a lot of debt. We were able to pay off a lot of debt and put a down payment on a cabin.
Again, on Passover, which this blew our mind. We had no idea. As we're sitting down, I am sitting down, putting this presentation together, I had to come to him and say, babe, oh my goodness, when I go back, and it's so funny because it's on Facebook, I go back and it's like, it's on Passover, Hanukkah, it's on Sukkot. All of these things are happening on his days, on his feasts, guys. And we had no idea. So, yeah.
We just had our blinders on. We thought we were all just doing the right thing, you know, but apparently we were. Oh, and here's another understanding that Vicki got.
This one's a big one, guys. I'm sorry. Yeah, no, I'm not sorry. I'm not sorry. But as a woman, you know, I grew up just as a Christian. These are things that we are not taught, that we are being brought back to an understanding of truly what it means to be a woman, and how we are not only precious, but what truly happened at the garden. And I remember May 2019, I had been, and I don't like to use the word counseling because I'm not a counselor, I have no titles. I just share, listen, this was what worked for me, and I find it in scripture. And so I was helping this lady in a very difficult situation with her husband. And I said, you know, have you prayed? And I'm like, have I prayed? Father, okay, so what happened in the garden? Really, have I ever prayed? I've prayed against incest. I don't want that in my lineage anymore. I've prayed against abuse, alcoholism. I've prayed about all of these curses that are in my line. I've never prayed against what happened in the garden. I want to be pre-fall.
Yes.
I want to be pre-fall, Father. As I'm talking to this lady, it's like I'm getting this understanding of myself, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is big. This is really big. And I said a simple prayer. I'm not a very complicated prayer. Like I just say, Father, you know what? I want to be pre-fall. I want my husband. I want that echad. I want that everything that we described. I want him to see me and just be in love with me and see me as a jewel, as a flower. I want to be protected. All of these things that I wanted, that I saw were pre-fall, I asked for and I prayed for. And I can tell you that it was a very powerful moment. Very, very powerful. That simple little prayer was so powerful that I can tell you 7 weeks later, where we are is just incredible. The transformation of what our marriage has become since this one prayer. Because this is what Scripture tells us. We are free through Yeshua. And I had never, I don't know if you ladies have ever thought of this, but I had never prayed against what happened in the garden between Adam and Eve. And I wanted to be free from that. So, that's what I'm sharing. We're almost done.
Yeah. You couldn't get to the person if there was an influence in the way. So what's been happening? We've been given the power, to cast out demons, right? So we've been doing that because we couldn't be ministered to or ministered to others with the influences in the way. So that's what's been happening this entire time, is we've been discovering these influences and praying against them, right? So we got that enormous tax return that I didn't think was going to happen because I only worked a couple months out of that year, but somehow, I don't know. And we were able to put a down payment on this right here. Right? 560 square feet, and there's 5 of us. I'm not a small guy. But I have a background in the military. I could sleep under the truck. So it's just, I keep the motivation up for everybody else. Right? You know what I'm talking about. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. I'm going to use my K-pot as rock for a pillow. So that's where we are. This is where we live. And it's amazing. It is. Because we wake up and we see sunrises. We tend the earth. I mean, look at the, you can't really see it that well. I'll show you guys pictures on my phone later. It looks like the ocean in that field when there's enough fog, when the mist is out. It's amazing. So we moved in July. We began living on the established homestead as tenant farmers, and just being able to learn the skills that my father left behind to move into the city, right, has been a blessing to us. It really has. In fact, it's been such a blessing that come Saturday morning, we're just...
For the Sabbath.
And that's the way it was designed. Everything has a purpose, right? Everything has a purpose. We were designed that way. So in August of this month, right now, we're looking at an opportunity to buy our own land. We are not going to try to make it happen on our own accord. We're going to wake up every day and say yes, and we're going to be as helpful as we can. And then we're going to wait for the Father to kind of hit us with it, like the 2x4. You know? When he says jump, we'll jump. To get out there, I mean, seriously, the pillar of fire was backing out of the driveway, honking the horn, and we were like, okay, let me get my boots on, finally, okay, let's go. Because it was us that was dragging our feet, you know. But we're finishing the cabin. And it's interesting the way everything has happened on a feast so far. We did our testimony on Passover 2 years ago. How long did it take the Israelites to reach the Jordan the first time? 2 years. What'd they do? They sent spies in, right? How long were they over there? 40 days. We've been in the cabin about 40 days. So we're coming back to give you guys our first fruits at the table. And we want to be like Caleb and Joshua. We want to give a good report. We don't want you guys to go around the mountain for 38 years. We don't want to go around the mountain for 38 years. It is awesome. Awesome the farther away you get from society. The closer you get to earth, the closer you get to the Father. It is truly amazing. Be like Caleb and Joshua. Give a good report. You know?
Even when you're peeing and pooping in a composting.
Yep, yep.
As a woman, I tell Ryan, you better be building me a hut real soon. she should. She should.
So, that is our presentation, exploring the mindset, exploring what it took for us to get here, right? And exploring what it takes. As the Israelites left Mitzrayim, they complained. They were given everything they needed and then some. They were given wealth. And what did they do with it? Right? And the food fell from the skies.
Yeah.
Right? And then they ended up spending another 38 years going around the mountain until a generation died, minus Caleb and Jacob. Joshua. So be like Caleb and Joshua. Wake up and say yes. Be grateful. Be grateful for everything that you have and everything that you're doing. Try to do more. I mean, that's what it takes. You know, you've got to have the right mindset walking in. And the mindset is, Father, less of me, more of you.
Amen.